Hi, Michael A. Smith here again, continuing our storytelling session regarding Secrets, the murder mystery story taken from my published novel of the same name. Now, what we've learned so far is that Frank Montgomery's neighbor, Vernon Ritchie, was killed. Frank's wife, Lois, was out the same night. Chief of Detectives Paul Murray has found footprints leading back into the Lakeview subdivision. And Frank has recently discovered that his wife, Lois, and one of the neighbors, Kathy Iverson, were having affairs with the deceased, Vernon Ritchie, at one of his rental properties. So Frank decides he has to confront his wife with all this evidence. And when he does, she readily admits that she was having an affair with Vernon, although she denies killing him. When Frank says, "Explain to me why," she says, "I'm not going to. Not at this time." She said, "But I am taking the kids, and I'm going to stay with my parents in Philadelphia for a while until all of this settles out." Frank said, "It'll look like you're running." And Lois replies, "Well, then tell your friend Murray, and maybe he'll arrest me." But Frank decides to keep his wife's involvement quiet for the moment, so the next day he takes her and the kids to the train, and they're off to Philadelphia. Frank's a newspaper reporter. He's still got to make a living, so he goes to a downtown hotel after he drops his family off because he has an interview with the applicant for the job of city manager. He concludes this interview and is about to go back to the newspaper and write it up when into the hotel walks Gail Zimmerman. And Frank recalls that Shirley had related to him that Vernon had received gossip anonymously that Gail Zimmerman was a prostitute. So Frank pulls back and watches as Gail gets on the elevator, and when it stops at the third floor, Frank runs up the stairs. He's out of breath, but he pushes open the exit door just in time to see that Gail has walked down to the other end of the hallway, and the man stepping out of the room to hold open the door for her is none other than his neighbor, Jesse Fernandez. So Frank, at that point, does go back to the newspaper and write up the interview, but his mind is elsewhere, thinking about everything he's learned. So that evening at about 7 o'clock, he walks around the lake over to Jesse Fernandez's house and knocks on the door, and Jesse lets him in and said, "Would you like a beer, Frank?" Frank says, "Sure." So Jesse goes out into the kitchen, gets the beer, gets himself a scotch, and returns. He has a little tray on a side table, and on it he lays a couple of slices of lemon and a paring knife. So Frank sits down and says, "I just wanted to talk to you, Jesse, about Vernon and his murder." And Jesse immediately says, "I assume you suspect me." He said, "I saw you down at the end of the hall at the hotel at midday, Frank." He said, "That's why they call it a nooner." So Frank says, "It's true that Gail Zimmerman is a prostitute." And Jesse replies, "Well, she actually works for an escort agency." He said, "I found out about it when Vernon told me." And Frank is again amazed at the secrets he's finding out about Vernon. So he said, "Why did Vernon tell you?" And he said, "Well, Vernon used to come over and talk to me. I'm an old man. I'm 75 years old. A lot of people think that we're senile, and we don't have any friends anyway that we can repeat gossip to. Besides," he said, "I told Vernon that Emma was no longer interested in sex, and he told me about Gail." So Frank says, obviously, Vernon knew about Gail and used her services. "Yes, and did you know about the other women in Vernon's life?" Frank asked. "You mean Lois and Kathy?" Jesse replies. Frank is stunned, and Jesse said, "Well, I wasn't about to make moves on those two young ladies." He said, "After all, it is a neighborhood situation." He said the same wasn't true with Gail because that's her profession. And Frank says, I'm stunned." He said, this means that all kinds of people had a motive to kill Vernon. And Jesse said, that's true. There's women sperm, both Kathy and Lois. He said there's J.W. who may have found out about Gail and decided to kill her customers. He said, in which case I might be one of his targets. And Frank interrupts and said, and there's Daryl, who may have found out about Kathy's liaisons with Vernon. Jesse interrupts and says, and then there's you, Frank. You're a suspect too. And Frank shoots back with the fact, yeah, Jesse, but you're the only one who had a financial motive. You invested in Vernon subdivision. I understand that's underwater and may never get completed. And Jesse laughs and picks up the knife, which concerns Frank, but all Jesse does is cut off another slice of lemon and put it in his scotch and water. And then he says, there's only one problem with your motive for me killing Vernon. And he said, and that's Shirley. She received a $2 million life insurance proceed resulting from Vernon's death, and she's assured me that she's going to use it to financially rescue the subdivision, put it back on its feet, and complete it. Down the road, I stand to actually make some money once houses start to sell. So Frank leaves and walks out in the dark on the road around to his house, and now he's totally confused because almost everybody in the neighborhood, as it turns out, had reason to kill Vernon, including Frank, except he didn't know about all this before Vernon was killed. So we'll try and unravel this in the next storytelling session about secrets. We're halfway through now. I hope to see you back again. I'm Michael A. Smith. Thanks for listening in.